Hello, I'm Jay Cruz, afternoon host in the USA, heard in Seattle, Washington, and Cincinnati, Ohio. Welcome to the Quarter Hour with a man who likes three kinds of football, Wade Kingsley.
Thank you, Jay Cruz. I do love three kinds of football. You're right. Hello and welcome to the Quarter Hour, my brand new radio podcast. It's a podcast all about radio and the radio we love and enjoy. Still to this day, on today's episode, a little bit of a setup. What's the Quarter Hour about? What am I going to be rabbiting on about for 15 minutes every week? And also, we're going to look at the 2026 agenda. What are the big issues facing radio around the world this year? All right. Well, welcome. Thanks for joining me, by the way, dear listener. I'm going to use dear listener. Dear listener was a phrase that one of my radio heroes, John Vincent, Vinny, to those who know him from SAFM in Adelaide and 5KA and other stations before that, he always used to say dear listener and always felt like it was a conversation just between him and I. And I'm sure there are thousands of people thinking exactly the same thing in Adelaide radio at the same time. So this is a conversation between you and I. That's what I'd love this podcast to be. A chance for you to ask questions, a chance for us to get some guests on and you can grill them, I can grill them. We can talk about the really big issues that are happening in radio across the world. Obviously, I'm based in Australia, but I really want this to be a global podcast, not because I aim for world domination, but I think there are issues in common all across the world with radio stations that I work with or I've worked at. I can guarantee you some of the things that you're feeling and thinking about today are also being thought about in other countries. So majority Australian audience to start with. So hello if you're from Australia today, or if you're joining us from, what have we got? The Netherlands, we've got the UK, US, Canada, and New Zealand. We've got people from everywhere. So thank you for joining. If you've jumped on the live stream, fantastic. Thank you. That's the way to get interactive. The interactive part of the program, which I don't know if I hear many podcasts doing this enough, is actually bringing in comments as we're recording, which I really like. So, for example, I can kind of bring some comments on the screen for those people watching, or I can read them out if you're listening to this. And there's going to be comments like this one from Richard. Quarter Hours Live. Congratulations, Wade. Gavin, I love this. Is this thing on? Yes, it is on. I'm hoping it's on. We've got Cam from Darwin. Good morning. Kelly from Newcastle. Good morning. All of that stuff as well. So if you're listening on the pod later than the broadcast, that's totally fine. I promise you it won't be an inferior experience, but if you do want to watch live and listen later, then I'll always advertise the times of the show that we are broadcasting. Just on that, how often am I going to be broadcasting? It's going to be once a week or twice a week, depending on the news cycle, and most likely Tuesdays and Thursdays. I won't put that in place as like a set ritual just yet. It's going to be very much fluid based on when I can get guests. I mean, if Howard Stern comes on, if he wants to be on at midnight on a Wednesday, that's when we're doing him. But when I can get guests, when I've got news issues to talk about, when there's something really significant, but I'll always make sure that you're informed when I'm broadcasting live. And you can always listen later, of course, on your favorite podcasting app. What else do I want to tell you about the pod? Really, I would love it to be interactive. If you're one of the 100 plus people who've signed up to be a P1, in our WhatsApp group, you can chat there. You also get the link to the show to watch it live, and you can also comment, and we're going to show some P1 comments on today's episode as well. All right, well, I think that's a bit of an explain about what I'm trying to do with the Quarter Hour. Let's get into today's content because, look, do you know I've only got like 11 minutes left? That's how quick this is going to go. So between you and I, we'll get there, but let's talk about some of the big issues that are happening this year. All right, so I'm calling this the 2026 agenda for radio. What are some of the big things on the agenda? Now, this applies if you work in radio now, you used to work in radio and don't anymore, you're in radio management, you're in radio sales, you're in radio content, wherever you are. And specifically, I'm talking about broadcast radio. I'm going to have a lot to say about podcasting and podcasters coming up in a few months, but for now, let's focus on broadcast radio. So here are the three big issues that I see that radio has to grapple with in 2026, and then I've got some comments from the P1s to go with it as well. First of all, I think radio should stop talking about what is radio and instead talk about who is radio. And what I mean by that is I think we know now that radio has its own absolute uniqueness. Live, local, human experience, shared connection, with those phrases get mentioned a lot, and that's absolutely true. But we don't need to keep redefining it, I don't think. I think what we should do is think about the audience, as we always would as programmers, as salespeople, is think about the audience and think about who they are, because that's a very marketable audience. Radio people still give radio listening long duration, long time spent listening. And that happens mostly now for demographics, sort of 30 plus, I'm calling it. Some people might say 25, 54. I actually think 35, 64 is the new 25, 54. And really, they're the audience that grew up with free-to-air television, free local radio, and they still are incredibly loyal and give great listening and attention to those favourite channels and favourite personalities. So I think we need to talk more about who radio is and really delve in on who those listeners are and what value they bring to advertisers in terms of the content we produce. I'd love to start talking again about talent development. This podcast, we know that podcasters are making their way onto the radio now, and that's fantastic. But where else are we finding them? I remember great programmers that I worked with, people like Dean Buchanan and Eric Selmans. They would say we need to go and find the talent where they are. Go to comedy clubs, go on stage, look for improv performances. Because one thing I think podcasters are really good at is the conversation. However, vast majority of podcasts are edited and they're rehearsed and practiced and reshot and re-recorded. I think the art of live is something that's gone a bit missing. And I know if you work in radio now, you probably pre-record a lot of your breaks before you actually do them live. One of the reasons I'm doing this podcast live and unedited is for that reason. I really believe in the power of live. I think there's something about you knowing this is happening right now. Now, we know that listeners don't always hear something that's pre-recorded, but I think as a craft thing, as a skill, I actually think live performance is something we should go back to and finding those people who can talk to an audience, talk to a crowd live. So I think that's one of the things radio should look at this year. And the third thing for me is, whether you like it or not, everyone in radio now is either in sales or marketing. Now, you probably have content on your job description, or you might have promotions, or you might have anything that sort of sounds like that. But the reality is you're either trying to acquire an audience, therefore you're in marketing, or you're trying to get revenue based on reaching that audience, which is sales. If you can develop your skill sets to be in one of those areas, you'll have a much longer career than if you're just in content or just behind the scenes in radio. And I don't mean to diminish those roles of content creation, because clearly they're still important. People come for the content and they stay for the content. But I think if you're in sales or marketing and you have some skills where you know how to stand in front of a client and pitch an idea, think of an idea to start with. If you're in marketing, you know ways to attract an audience. If you're experimenting on social channels yourself, it's really going to be helpful to you to understand that. So they're my big three. Talk about who is radio and stop talking about what is radio. Talent development. Where are the live performers and can we get them back on broadcast radio? And everyone in radio is in sales or marketing. Now, I asked the P1s, and this is another advantage of being a P1. You can be a P1. Just go to thequarterhour.com. It's free until January the 31st to be a P1. I asked them, what do they think some of the biggest issues in radio were in 2026? And here's a sample of them. So this was from a marketing industry CMO. And this person says, I see the biggest challenge for radio is the ongoing issue of effectiveness attribution. We can see sales spike as soon as the radio kicks in, along with increased digital engagement, but it's still guesswork. This makes radio and audio a much harder justification in the media mix, especially for marketers who are not tracking the total effectiveness of the media mix and noting the impact main media, including radio, has on digital effectiveness and e-commerce. Also, the opportunity, rather than the issue, is for stations and clients to embrace the watch now or watch later opportunity for new audience reach and client integration into broadcast video streaming. That's a really solid start. Thank you, marketing industry CMO. Agree with a lot of that. And I think one of the things too, talking about that media mix, is also thinking about how you can commercialize that, but also thinking about the people that buy media may not have grown up with broadcast radio. They might be younger, they might be growing up more with podcasts and social channels. So radio doesn't come as naturally to them as you'd hope and think. So I think that's an important call out as well. Scott Keenan, g'day Scott, thanks for putting this forward for us. I think advertising dollars is going to be one of the biggest issues for radio globally. Absolutely. The big platforms are hoovering up media dollars in a massive way. YouTube, Meta, Spotify, and TikTok are a massive threat because that's who radio is largely in competition with now. It's a competition for attention and also for ad dollars, which keep those audio businesses afloat. Thanks, Scott. And I'm glad you brought up attention. I'm actually going to be at Radio Days Europe at the end of March in Latvia, and we're going to be talking about attention, getting attention for brands. So I agree with that one too. Paul, okay, my take is that the Australian landscape shaped by consolidation, absolutely. Networking and simulcasting is going to suffer greatly with fewer on-air production roles that historically has functioned as the industry's talent incubator. If these completely disappear, radio loses those low-risk environments where people learn the end-to-end craft of radio and develop their voices. We're already seeing the structural shift is driving executives towards de-risk talent. Yeah, de-risk talent from successful podcasters. Thanks, Paul. Great comments there. I know you had a few others, but we're going to keep moving. Gavin, biggest issues for radio, where do you start? How about these? Finding and engaging audiences so that advertisers keep spending money on radio. Yep. How do we get the rusted on AM and FM listeners to expand their horizons to DAB where it's available? Absolutely. Funding public service broadcasting. I think that's a bit of a sleeper issue this year. We know what's happened in the US with NPR, and I might do a dedicated episode coming up soon to public broadcasting funding, because it does have an effect on commercial broadcasters and it does have an effect on trust of the medium as well. Lots of other comments there, Gavin. Thank you for that. I've got to race through it because we are a 15-minute podcast, as you know. So that's the 2026 agenda for radio. If you've got a contribution, just jump online, become a P1, thequarterhour.com, and I'd love to hear what you think are some of the biggest issues for the year ahead. All right, the end of every episode, I'm going to do what I call liner notes. These are just a few bits and pieces of things that are happening currently at the moment in the market. I'm going to be a little bit Australia heavy today because I'm here, but I'd love you to make contributions from wherever you are around the world. What's happening in your market in radio as well? Yesterday in Australia, this is Thursday, Australian time, so yesterday there was an announcement from the Supreme Court in New South Wales around a dispute between commercial radio and audio, CRA, and the PPCA, which represent musicians, artists and record companies. This is about royalties, and this is a really interesting story, and I'm going to do a deep dive on this on another episode as well, because what's happened is the judgment has come down and effectively there is a small increase, very small increase to the PPCA, much less than what they were hoping for. And I think commercial radio and audio have done a great job here in making sure that they're protecting the viability of the radio industry in Australia. There's been a small increase to royalties, but nothing major. And really what they're arguing about is this 1% cap. And that 1% cap protects jobs in Australia. Absolutely it does. And when you think about radio having to compete with all the streamers, and radio still being a great source of supporting local artists, particularly, I think this is probably a pretty fair judgment. It's a shame that there couldn't be a resolution and everyone could have saved millions of dollars in legal fees. But, you know, sometimes you have to go to court to fight for what you think is right. And I think CRA have done this pretty well. Also on my liner notes today, I've got the Australian Audio Awards. So if you're in Australia and want to enter the Australian Audio Awards, I'm one of many judges. Entries close for that on the 6th of March, so make sure you get in there. Big news in Australia at the moment is the merger between what was Southern Cross Austereo and Seven West Media. We don't know what the name of the company is yet. I don't think I've seen an announcement. They're sort of trading on the stock exchange as Southern Cross Media, which they always have. I wonder if this is the end of the famous Austereo name. It would be sad, but probably a recognition of the times we live in, that it is now more than just a radio network. It would be a media network, obviously. So watch this space. Obviously, the things that will happen in the next couple of months, sadly, are probably going to be some consolidation of jobs, back office jobs, finance, accounting, legal, things like that, but also sales teams. If you're in a sales team, you're more likely to be selling more than just radio or TV now. What else do I want to tell you about? Oh, I had this great clip. You've probably seen it going around on the socials, but if you haven't, it's Robert Irwin talking about the power of radio. Check this out.
I get home and I put on the radio and listen to Mix FM. Seriously, no, I'm actually being serious. There is something about listening to the radio at home when you've been away for 6 months. You're listening to the same songs over and over again in America, and then you just come back here, you put on the radio, the Crowded House, or it's Choir Boys, and you're just like, or it's the Angels, and you're just like, I'm home. There it is. It's so good.
There was Robert Irwin on Mix on the Sunshine Coast. Great testament to radio. Can you believe we're nearly at the end? I've got to wrap up. A couple of quick things for you. My next episode will be survey results live. Next Tuesday, the 20th of Jan, we've got the final survey from last year. I'm going to be sharing those results with you live at 9:30 Australian Eastern Daylight Time. It'll be a screen presentation like we were today. We'll have the survey results on the screen. We'll do a quick discussion around them in 15 minutes as well. And I also have to give a shout out to a few people. Mark Hine from Cairns has sent me this 4CA T-shirt. Thanks, Mark. He sent me a Star FM one as well. If you're a P1, send me one of your shirts. I'll wear it on the pod, and I'll send you some quarter-hour merch as well as that gets made. Also, I want to tell you that a couple of other shout-outs. We've got, who do we have today? Christine, Rachel, we've got Kelly. We've got a few people who are joining us. And also I want to shout out some of the very, very early P1s that joined us. Sign up straight away. Irene, Reenie, love you, Reenie. Larry McFeely from Phoenix. G'day, Larry. Makes a great bagel, does Larry. Julie Ziegler from WTOP in Washington. G'day, Jay-Z. Spencer Housen from Brisbane. Hi, Spencer. And Clive Dickens from Meliora as well. We'll try and get Clive on the pod at some point soon. It's already the quarter hour. We're already done. I'm excited to bring this pod to you. We'll bring it to you once or twice a week. Keep an eye on your social channels and on your email, and I'll tell you when the next episode is coming out. But for now, that's been the quarter hour.